Good morning, everyone. My name is Melissa Sanderson, and I have the privilege of being the co-chair of the Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations. I am very pleased that you all were able to join us today for a very interesting program entitled Brexit, a growing disaster for the EU, and with the wisdom of Lord Howard Flight of Worcester. The Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations is Arizona's premier foreign relations organization. We are dedicated to growing Arizona's global prominence by providing forums that explore critical foreign policy issues and build enduring international connections. Today's program is a great example of our mission in action. On June 3rd, Stephen Feldstein will join us to talk about his newly released book, The Rise of Digital Repression, which our members are currently reading and will discuss this Friday. You still have time to read the book, or at least the Cliff Notes. On June 8th, we are hosting Tara Kanglu on the Heartbeat of Iran, a program on artificial intelligence. And on June 16th, a program with Russian opposition activist Vladimir Kara-Murza. We will end the season with the program on El Salvador, with former El Salvador ambassador to the US, Ruben Zamora, and Claudia Umana, Vice President of FUSADES. Please visit our website, pcfraz.org, and sign up for a future program and see how you can become a member while you're there. Before we start, I want to make sure to thank our sponsors for making our work possible. Our title sponsor is Freeport-McMoRan. Our media sponsor is KJAZ. Our platinum sponsors are ASU's Sandra Day O'Connor School of Law, the McCain Institute, Snell and Wilmer, W.R. Schultz Investments, and the Thunderbird School of Global Management. Our gold sponsors are the Salt River Project, APS, South 32, and our silver sponsors are Spencer Fane, Wallace, Please, and Dreyer, and Chicanos por la Causa. I would also like to thank our international visionary donor, Ellen Schultz, and lifetime benefactors whose generous monetary gift allows PCFR to fulfill our mission. Keith Galbett, Charles Iron, Karen Meyer, J.P. Milone, Shoshana Tanser, and yours truly. For this program, please keep your audio on mute, and we will have the opportunity to ask our expert questions following the official part of the program. Ambassador Douglas Hartwig will moderate the Q&A portion of our program today. Thank you again for being here. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn it over to my friend Chandler Peterson, PCFR Program Committee member, who will introduce our distinguished speaker today. And I also like to welcome my cat, Malaika, to the proceedings.
Welcome.
Thank you, Chandler. Over to you.
Thank you, Mel. And this is a special time for all of us in PCFR to be able to reach across the pond and join hands with a esteemed colleague and friend of many years standing. In fact, since 1986, when Lord Flight, who I am privileged to know as Howard, before he was a Lord, launched his Guinness Flight Initiative with Tim Guinness and literally created, in many respects, the offshore financial services industry in the Isle of Guernsey, where he chaired the Financial Regulatory Commission there, later moved to Luxembourg, and after building Guinness Flight to a major global entity and enterprise, he sold it to Investec Partners and has since been operating in an entrepreneurial mode, which I'll come back to in just a moment. Winston Churchill famously remarked that England and America were two nations separated by a common language. And I'm proud to say that Howard, Lord Flight, does not share that issue because he actually was educated after studying and reading at Cambridge in history and economics at the University of Michigan in the US as a Power Scholar. There were no business schools in the UK at that time, and he knew that the starting salary would be 3x larger if he were able to get a good business school degree from the US. So Michigan counts him as an alumnus, and we count him as a fellow citizen in residence, at least for a period of years there. And he actually has visited Arizona and the Grand Canyon back during that iteration. He continues those ties to the US even today, as his son and 3 grandchildren are actually living in the greater New York City area, where the son is studying medicine. So we are not separated by a common language, Lord Flight. We have many commonalities. In fact, you have in your own career been in all aspects of finance, particularly in banking, where you have been both a private banker, a merchant banker, an investment banker, and now a venture capitalist and rescuer of distressed companies. So that broad gauge of experience obviously carries over into the global arena, and the foreign relations of a country are governed not in a small part by its economic strength. And in your initiative as head of the Economic Enterprise Initiative venture in the UK, which you helped found and pushed to stardom, if you will, you became what is known as an entrevestor, a new breed of Brit who has pushed the envelope in combining entrepreneurship and investment sagacity. In fact, we are reminded of a British Prime Minister of late who once remarked that the UK had, as does the United States, by the way, the capacity to go right into the edge of the abyss, peer over into the depths below, and at the last second, pull back to sanity and rationality and act in a way that saves and continues a very long democratic condition and economic provision. So you have been on the vanguard of advancing those interests and pulling the UK back on more than one occasion by your advocacy of conservative free enterprise principles within the greater configuration of the UK and its involvement with the continent in Europe per se. And we are very familiar with aspects of your bio, which have been distributed in advance here, but it's worth saying that you first emerged politically representing Arundel and South Downs in the House of Commons, and a few years back were granted a peerage in the House of Lords, and now are continuing your service to your native country with great skill and sagacity, and we're thankful for that. Your time abroad in India and other parts of the world working with such august financial institutions as Rothschild, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank, and others in the private banking arena give you a global perspective that is of particular relevance and interest to our group in the Phoenix Committee on Foreign Relations. And without belaboring further than that, I'd like to turn this over to you to share with us your remarks, your insights, your wisdom, and your briefing on the position of Brexit and its global impact, particularly within the EU and perhaps even peripherally in the United States. And so, Lord Flight, it is a pleasure to have you not only as a presenter today, but also whom my family call friend, Lord Howard Flight.
Thank you very much for such kind words. I'm sure you've overstated me by quite a large amount, but I will do my best to keep you interested today. Just starting off at almost randomly, when I was at school, I also, as well as studying political history, I studied economic history, and it's virtually been closed down as an academic subject, and yet I think it's one of the most important on the record, because it really does show you why quite a lot of things have happened, political things have happened. Behind it is the drive of economics. So I don't know whether economic history is taught in the US, but if not, I hope it probably will be. Anyway, turning to my talk today, I think collective decisions by British citizens at, for example, general elections or referendums or even local referenda have invariably turned out to be correct after the event. And I think this could not be more the case than with Brexit and the decision to leave the EU, which came as a great shock to people who were very pro EU, but not to those of us that had really got fed up with the EU for quite a while. And the EU's behavior regarding COVID-19 and the related vaccines, I fear, has shown the Commission not to be trusted and lacking in principles. Brussels was in dispute with AstraZeneca, the Anglo-Saxon pharmaceutical company, over the delayed delivery of certain COVID vaccines. The EU looked to have no legal case here when it published its contract with AstraZeneca, and far from being any sort of legally binding document, AstraZeneca had simply promised to use its reasonable best endeavours to fulfil the order on time. And the same or similar form of words was used for the UK and other vaccine providers with that had late deliveries. But the rights and wrongs here are ultimately beside the point. The EU's quarrel is with AstraZeneca and not with Britain. Well, in pursuit of its quarrel, Brussels announced plans to block the export of vaccines to Britain from a completely unrelated company, the American corporation Pfizer, and vaccines which no one disputed the UK had purchased and on which the EU did not pretend to have any ownership claims. Brussels was effectively threatening to halt the delivery of life-saving drugs to a neighbouring country, not in response to any provocation, but simply out of pique that the particular country was further advanced in its vaccination programme. The history sadly gets worse. To deflect criticism from its failed record in ordering vaccines, the European Commission aimed its legal attack at Britain. Its export ban did not apply to other neighbouring states. The only country in the vicinity to be targeted was, surprisingly, the UK. To make sure that no vaccine could enter the UK, the Commission announced that it was excluding Northern Ireland from the single market arrangements, which it had previously insisted were critical to the Irish peace process. It did not notify Britain nor Ireland in advance. Its move united every party in Dublin and Belfast against it, forcing it to back down. And I might say, fortunately, notwithstanding, though, a point was made that cannot now be unmade. For 4 years, EU negotiators claimed that the merest possibility of a border in Ireland would risk a return to terrorism. They worked to convince the world that this was a risk that Britain was somehow unwisely prepared to run. Yet it took only 29 days before the EU itself announced such a border, not advising Ireland or Britain in advance. Well, annoyed at Britain's success with vaccines, European leaders also started casting doubt on the efficacy of the AstraZeneca product. President Macron of France claimed that the vaccine didn't work. The EU was actually a bad neighbour, breaking all the norms of civilized behaviour and threatening expropriation over what it claimed was an ineffective vaccine. It is perhaps healthy that so early on after Britain's departure from the EU, the ill will of the Commission has been thus exposed. The summary history is as follows. The EC elbowed aside its member states, which had begun their own vaccine procurement programs, and insisted on negotiating en bloc for the full 27 EU member states. Uh, it, the, the program moved slowly and bureaucratically, reportedly because it was holding out, the EU was holding out for vaccines produced by continental firms. In the end, 3 months after Britain signed a contract with AstraZeneca similar to that which some of its nations had agreed to sign earlier. But as criticism mounted, it panicked and lashed out, overriding the principles of due process, private property, and free trade in the process. This is not the sort of organization that I and most other Brits would wish to be governed by. Fortunately, this event has been on public display and will not be forgotten. Our Prime Minister has wisely chosen not to react to all of this and has taken a statesmanlike reaction to calm this incident. But I'm sure that many of those who voted in the referendum to stay in the EU are subsequently shocked by the behaviour, particularly of France, in conjunction with the EU. Many expected Brexit to lead to a new era of friendly and successful cooperation between Britain and Europe, but the ideologues in Brussels really don't do friendship. You are either under their control or their rivals, and if so, to be undermined and exploited. The Prime Minister has so far refused to respond blow by blow to the EU's behaviour. We have had the astonishing threats by the EU to confiscate vaccine shipments contracted to the UK, the EU's counterproductive demonisation of AstraZeneca, the ban on the exports of shellfish, threats to disrupt the City of London, and especially the irresponsible dealings with the Northern Ireland Protocol. Our government has bided its time to see the trade and cooperation agreement ratified and signed off. Now Britain's fight back can commence as we see fit and when we see fit. Ironically, with the opening of the eyes of British citizens to the EU's behaviour, this has slashed British citizens' ratings of the EU. The UK government now has the support of a substantial proportion of British citizens to take tough measures if we see fit. It is now clear that we need to diversify our economy away from Europe as quickly as possible. We need to set taxes and regulations to maximize our global competitiveness, regardless of whether this triggers EU retaliation. The EU is regulating itself into digital oblivion, and its moral authority is crumbling if it is not careful how it behaves. Amazingly, Macron and Merkel have been in discussions with Putin over Sputnik collaboration with a Russian vaccine less than a fortnight after the head of the EU vaccine task force stated, "We have absolutely no need of Sputniks." While the Sputniks still have to be licensed, AstraZeneca has already been licensed by the European Medicines Agency, but Macron and Merkel have continued to criticize AstraZeneca on unsubstantiated safety grounds. At the same time, Brussels-based Eurocrats have criticized the UK for blocking EU access to AstraZeneca. The current politics of Europe are of the EU backing a belligerent France against the UK, even though we continue to behave as if France is an ally. We have had a continuing sequence of hostile gestures and behavior from France and the EU, with latterly the vindictive blackballing of Britain from the Lugano Convention, and the UK's refusal to recognise the important regulatory vehicle of equivalence for the financial services industry. Happily, Britain is now in a position to draw up plans to axe volumes of pre-Brexit cumbersome and unnecessary financial rules, having concluded there is no prospect of the EU accepting UK regulatory equivalence. So the UK has begun scrutinising the whole suite of finance industry regulations which were kept in British law at the time of the UK's departure from the EU as a possible basis for equivalence deals. But Brussels is simply stalling the equivalence process in the hope of stealing more financial service business from London or gaining concessions in other areas. UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak offered equivalence to EU firms in a wide spread of areas last November, but there was no reciprocal move from Brussels. France has now warned that it would further delay the equivalence process if the UK does not force Jersey to remove their conditions for fishing licenses. City opinion is increasingly coming round to the view that non-membership of the single market for financial services business will make little or no difference. The UK must now take major steps to make London even more internationally attractive and competitive for financial services. In the long term, excluding the UK from an equivalence regime is likely to prove a major error by the EU. President Macron will be disappointed if he seriously believes Britain would swallow a French promise of granting the city access to the EU's financial services market if the Bank of England grants concessions to the French on fishing in return. I believe the UK has quite rightly decided that it is no longer worth making any concessions in return for promises of future single market deals. And the growth prospects for our financial services industry lie elsewhere than the EU. It is increasingly clear that the single market is amongst the most overrated concepts in economic history. It promises a lot but delivers little. Despite all the warnings of catastrophe and disruption in January and February, British trade with the rest of Europe is getting more or less back to normal. There is even evidence that fish exports are recovering. I will be surprised if the city does not find a way around attempted EU single market constraints. The long-term growth markets for the city are anyway global, not European, and the potential business to be done by America and the UK is far greater than with the EU. In the new technical areas, moreover, the UK is better off out of the EU, who have just banned the use of artificial intelligence already smothered in EU regulation. The number of £1 billion technology businesses in the UK has grown tenfold over the last decade, outstripping the number created by France and Germany combined. There are now 81 British unicorns compared to 48 between France and Germany. What is becoming apparent is that France is experiencing some panic and may be nearing a tipping point. The French are asking what will be their equivalent of Brexit. Will it be another 1961 style failed putsch with left-wing student insurrection, or hopefully something milder? Macron has admitted that Leave would win a vote on Frexit, though no one in France wants to risk this. France's woes are many and increasing. Crime and disorder remain dangerously high. Extremist Islamicism is rife. Racism and tensions between communities continue to steer France's Republican heritage. The economy has been sluggish for several years, weighed down by excessive taxes, a bloated state, too much red tape, militant unions, and a residual anti-entrepreneurialism. Unemployment is high, especially among the young, and the education system, captured by egalitarian lefties, is in long-term decline. France's crisis is far greater than Britain's problems. Extremist parties of left and right have come to enjoy huge and too much French support. Michel Barnier, now putting himself forward as a potential French presidential candidate, is calling for the end of all immigration from outside the EU for 5 years and a rethink of the Schengen Agreement. When we British wanted to control immigration, Barnier dismissed this as xenophobic. And now he is seeking to tap into France's anger against the system. He is, of course, driven by Le Pen's 26% poll rating, where much of her support is surprisingly now derived from younger people. Should she win, which I think unlikely, it would be a disastrous choice. But also of growing concern is the increasing political hostility in France of the military and the police. Britain's liberal conservative solution to the immigration issue is far more conducive to harmony, freedom, and social mobility. France is in great need of a Thatcher to liberate her economy and then to show that a respectable candidate can be tough on crime. It is difficult not to conclude that Britain is better off outside the EU, both politically and economically, and that France, in particular, which has been leading the EU, has a worsening case of troubles of its own making. I just hope that France's problems will not worsen and will not contaminate our own successful recovery for Britain. Thank you all very much. I'm delighted to ask any questions. I'm not sure how long I've banged on for, but I feel it's more than enough, and I hope that I have painted a picture that is fair and reasonable, but includes elements that should not be brushed over. So here we are.
Thank you, Lord Flight. Well, you certainly have painted a picture, I will say that, indeed. Most interesting, quite a perspective. You really started very much on COVID. And needless to say, I think every one of our countries has been battered severely by it. And I think in also all of our countries, it's not necessarily brought out in the early stages, best policies or thinking. And it was most unfortunate to see the row sort of picking up between the EU and you and Great Britain over these very, very difficult times. And we hope this subsides.
Can I comment that I thought, at the beginning of all of this, America was not fully organized, but I've been really impressed with the speed with which America has grasped everything, and virtually nearly everyone's been vaccinated like that. And I want Britain to copy America and not France.
Well, we have been fortunate. I mean, we had a slow start, but we really picked it up very well. And
yeah,
that's a tribute to an awful lot of hardworking people at the state, local, as well as federal government level. So, and we wish that for everybody, including in the third world where it has barely begun.
Sure.
I would like to kind of get your perspective. I'll start with a couple of questions, and I have different questions posed in the chat function right now. I was sort of taken, and this is a political question, having done some review before our conversation this afternoon, that I remain concerned about the implications of Brexit for some of the cohesion in the UK. And here I'm really talking political cohesion, but very quickly, when you get to North Ireland, it's not just political cohesion. There's a cultural dimension to all of this too. But watching what the elections in May, in just a couple of weeks ago in Scotland, I wonder what that means on the horizon. And watching the now sort of reemerging concerns and riots criticized by your prime minister, rightly, but nevertheless reflecting the tensions that remain alive in Northern Ireland about both Brexit, but conditions of being, particularly from the Unionists, being separated from the UK, as opposed to being pulled south toward Ireland. I'm just would be interested to get your perspective on that, because we're still very much in an adjusting period right now. This is only really a year and a half after Brexit kind of gets launched, but it's still worrisome, I think, to see that, and we wonder where it's going.
Yes, and I think that there is a pretty strong view by the English that they don't want a breakup of the Union, but equally that they, if it's got to happen, then it's got to happen. I'd make the point, and I can't understand why we don't hear more of it, but the something like citizens in Scotland get about 20% more per person spent on them with money that has come from England. And bluntly, if Scotland had to go independent with its own finances and its own arrangements, it's completely non-viable as a separate state. And I think the point is not made that aggressively because there's the view that it may only stir up ill will. But at some stage, I think it needs to be made, because I think the Scottish people are being really rather misled with what the options are. Perhaps surprisingly, although the island of Ireland is in some ways a more difficult and issue, and given the history of violence, partly because of that, my assessment is that arrangements with Ireland will be, whatever they strange concoctions they may be, will actually be dealt with satisfactorily, and that we certainly won't see any breakup of where we are between England and the island of Ireland. Wales, again, without English finance, Wales is a non-viable state. So the big issue is Scotland, and I don't know how it's going to break. I think this the Boris government is capable and likely to deal with it in a civilized and accommodating fashion, and there will actually be more money for Scotland than rather than less. But whether that will work or not, I'm not so sure. The Scottish loyalty goes back a long time, and in a way, what we're seeing is a reversal back to how things stood 200 or 300 years ago.
Well, sir, I think we have to deploy Chandler's relatives to kind of make sure that things kind of sort themselves out.
Absolutely, yes.
Let me turn to economics a little bit, because at the end of the day, the economic dimension of it is really very important. I was recently in the UK, actually late 2019, at our embassy there, meeting with Ambassador Johnson and others.
How do you like the new building?
Isn't it unbelievable? It's yeah. a $1 billion building. It's something else. Um, but you know, the importance of reestablishing or altering and expanding economic relationships outside of the EU uh, remain at the heart, I think, of helping the UK and seeing the UK really head off in a different direction. You know, recent trade statistics with the EU show things have dropped way down. Now, it could be temporary because of COVID and come back, but there's certainly a lot of stresses and strains that we know. The discussion I had at the embassy when I was there was really surrounding the whole notion of a bilateral free trade agreement with the United States. I know you've had a lot of discussions with the Australians and others as well. So I'm sort of curious, how do you see that kind of going? Because these are all very tough undertakings, particularly for a country like the UK that for the last 25 years really hasn't done trade negotiations. It's kind of been at the hands of the EU. And it takes some practice to kind of get there. Any comments?
Um, well, I hope what I'm about to say will not wrongly be taken as complacent, but um, I I think that we can get back into the driving seat fairly quickly, and there have been some very effective individuals already shown their success in negotiations with the EU. So I I I believe that the UK and in particular America. I don't see anything particularly in the way of stopping very satisfactory trade agreements, trade negotiations, and trade agreements. And as I commented earlier, I mean, America is and has for a long time been in effectively the same position that the UK is now in vis-a-vis the EU. And America has conducted all the trade that it wants to do with the EU without any problems. And really that's what I was sort of getting at by saying that really I think the single market is a bit of a mirage. If I want to go and buy something in Europe, I can get on my bike and go and buy it and bring it home. Nothing's not going to stop me. Um, so uh, I um, well, I very much hope that the USA and the UK will get together, will um, structure trade deals that suit both of them. And I don't really see what is in the way of doing just that.
I see. Kind of on that theme then, a little bit, but kind of my earlier
Yeah.
comment. I have a chat comment question from one of our members, Rick Gunnell, and I'll just read it to you because it's pretty straightforward. With family and financial interests in Ireland, I get mixed messages with respect to financial stability of Ireland. How will all this stress play out on the short and long-term future of Ireland? Of course, we're talking about the UK, but comment about Ireland as well.
Well, the first point I'd make, and if you like, cast your mind back probably about 10 years, I forgot, maybe less, but the EU initially behaved incredibly badly towards Ireland and sort of fleeced them for every penny they could get out of them. Amazingly, the Irish, pulled themselves together, got on with it, and within no time they'd got their economy doing fine. And congratulations to them. And so, again, my comment is that I think that Britain understands the importance of staying friends with Ireland. You may remember that the Queen was sent over to Ireland not so long ago, the first time a British monarch had been to Ireland since the 19th century. And I think that there are all the signs of down-to-earth constructive relationship between England and Ireland. And now that island is, as we know, sort of two islands, but and there'll be slightly different trade agreements between the two, but it's I think it's in reasonably secure shape, and I certainly wouldn't be nervous of investing money in Ireland. Quite the
Oh, indeed.
reverse of anything.
Indeed. Um, Mel Sanderson asks a question. As the separation continues, I guess this is Brexit separation,
Yeah.
would the UK consider economic incentives to entice investors to enter, essentially replacing some of the former EU companies which have chosen to relocate?
I'm not quite sure what the question is. I'll do my best, but then come back to me. I mean, um, the amount of businesses that are relocating out of Ireland are very few, and quite a lot of that had said they might have latterly said they're going to stay where they are. And so I don't see. Well, I think the French in particular are hopeful that they're going to pick up lots of business relocating from England to France. I don't actually think that's what's going to happen. There'll be some, but not that much. But the sort of thing that is quite important is that we, for example, we keep corporation tax down to the 19% level, making us the most tax attractive corporation tax regime going. And given that the strength of the recovery now is far greater than had been expected. I mean, growth is around 10%. I think that things are going to pan out better than many think. And I'm a supporter of Haldane, who hasn't left the Bank of England yet, but who is the Bank of England economist that has been proven right for some time now in forecasting a very positive outcome.
Good. Well, let's hope so. No, I was reading, of course, that there are some very important multinational banks, a couple American, even British banks, who are relocating senior personnel to the EU, not so much to leave London, as opposed to shore up and make and strengthen their EU capabilities. And that, of course, when one company sort of is reducing staff and moving the other somewhere else, that is always a kind of a bit of a worry. Is this a trend happening or not?
Yeah. Well, yes, some of it, but I think if anything, the movement of individuals from Britain to the EU is going to be much less than a lot of people expect.
Yeah. Okay. I have another, going back to your comments about President Macron and France. Our member Azim Hamid asks, is a Frexit France a likely ally of the UK, or would it be more threatening rival than a French-led EU?
Well, first of all, saying anything can happen, and as I pointed out, while France has been behaving pretty badly towards the UK recently, we are still very much NATO allies and signed up to fight together if necessary. So it's a strange world, maybe. I Well, I certainly don't think that there's any prospect that Britain will rejoin the EU at some period. The question is, will the EU hold together? And my guess is yes, probably it will, although there will be increasing tensions in due course between Germany and France. And I think the real question is, will the EU collectively bring in the sort of economic liberalization that is needed to get the economies going, because at present, and if you look at the data over the last 20 years, I mean, it's just shrunk and shrunk and shrunk relatively. It's been, the performance of the EU has been pathetic.
And I have a follow-up question from another one of our members, Susan Weidner, but it's very much in the same vein. Has Brexit served as a wake-up call to the EU to address many of the shortcomings you described?
I think, well, it should have done, and it has done to some extent, but I think quite a lot of the reaction of the EU is in fact not to say, my goodness me, we've got to sort ourselves out, I think a lot of the reaction is to say we're right, everyone else is wrong, and we'll continue doing things our way. So that's when I'm I'm quite negative for the outlook for the EU on those sort of grounds.
Yeah. Maybe in a broader context, may put it this way, a strategic context. I mean, many of us have watched the Brexit events or the Brexit process with some concern about what are the political implications with regard to a broader alliance we all share with respect to, again, facing the Russia, facing those kinds of authoritarian concerns and threats. And I was assured in previous discussions that this does not really affect NATO very much. NATO is kind of where all that really resides, and we should not worry too much about that kind of thing. And yet it is still there. And I'm curious, having watched Belarus take down an aircraft, commercial aircraft.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable that they did that. And I haven't seen if the Russians have responded or reacted any which way at all, but the Europeans have reacted pretty quickly, and I think Washington and probably London will too. But it just sort of reminds us that there are authoritarian regimes quite capable of doing some pretty ugly things that catch us by surprise. And
absolutely. And I mean, all I would say is that purely because of its relative size and power, I think America has to be in the lead of how we're reacting to Russia and their group of countries. But I think it's quite worrying and it's quite difficult because you know, whichever way you turn, it can come out wrong. If you indulge, then it can encourage them to continue with such behavior. If you wrap them over the knuckles and do some tough things to them, then it gives them ammunition to say that they're being treated wrongly. So it's a real bore, and well, my only hope is that the regime within Russia itself might change sooner rather than later.
yeah, indeed, very, very problematic.
Yeah.
Another member, Frankie Peralta, asked, it's along the same lines, but do you think the whole of Europe in the long term is better off dismantling the EU?
As a matter of fact, I do. I think the EU is it damages their economies. It is an over bureaucratic, heavy-handed system that is not good for their economies. I think there is. Well, I don't think it's going to happen in the foreseeable future, but I think it may happen eventually because, in particular, the smaller economies are certainly not benefiting much from their EU membership, but they're being told what to do by the bosses of the EU, which they don't much like.
No, indeed. Let me turn to migration policy. You know, we in the United States, we've been through a very tumultuous 4 years, and they continue on, and I suspect over the foreseeable future will continue as well, about the whole issue of immigration and mostly immigration here, right? That certainly was an important element in the original vote about Brexit in 2016. And
It's
it
rather
remains
washed
very,
in a UK context. It is sort of rather washed away. I mean, you don't. If you look at the papers and everything else, there are very few stories about immigration. The numbers of people that are coming to the UK has declined. It's right now. It isn't a UK issue. In fact, if anything, I think we should make it easier for skilled people to come here. We need their skills.
interesting comment, because that certainly was the concern back in the mid 2000s of so
Yeah.
many people coming to the UK, and that seems to have eased. Huh?
Yeah. No, and I mean, it's not for me to tell America what to do, but when I see these little children, in these ghastly camps, you can't, your heart goes out to them basically. And in a way, I think that um, sooner or later, the established world is going to have to um, sort out humanitarian policies to deal with it.
Oh, indeed. Well, listen, in the spirit of whipsawing you back and forth, let's go
Right.
back to harder core issues for Brexit. Uh, Rohit Cantor, another member, says, "Well, what would be the long-term implication of Brexit on the UK financial industry, an area you're quite familiar with,
Yeah.
especially on the impact of the City of London?"
Well, I think it will be minor. And I think people have, some people who didn't want us to leave have sort of uh, scratched up fear stories which really don't stand up to much. And as I said a little bit earlier, I think in quite a lot of areas, the single market doesn't really do anything. That if people want to use the services of um, a fund manager in London, then they're going to do that. Uh, so uh, the point that is obvious is that London needs to befriend, assist, build up its non-EU business, which it's been doing to some extent already, but it needs to do that more actively. Um, but I don't think you're going to see either a great exit of business from London to Europe, or in terms of new business, it will go to wherever it can be done most effectively, most competitively, and not driven by politics.
Yeah, indeed. Good. And a follow-up from Susan Widener relates to your earlier comment, which I also found interesting. How serious are interruptions in the labor market, cross-border hiring, and university exchanges in the wake of Brexit?
Well, I don't know that I can actually give you a particularly good answer, because initially there were concerns about university arrangements that had been structured in EU terms, and were they going to continue? Um, all I will say is that my expectation is that things will end up being crafted sensibly and satisfactorily, and enabling, as I said earlier, the talent that this economy needs being able to come and live here without great difficulty. Certainly, our universities have a lot of non-Brits in them right now. It's a big industry, and so again, I think it's not going to be a huge issue.
Not going to be a huge issue. Good. Well, I'd like to call on other members if you'd like to pose more questions. Chandler, it'd be great to hear from you. This is what I always do, Lord Flight. When questions slow down, then you start calling on the class, right?
I'd say you're a real professional, basically. But,
Oh boy.
just flashing back, where your new embassy is, I mean, the land around there was a sort of depressed area, and I've hoped that Americans are going to make a lot of money out of buying up that land, putting your embassy there, increasing the value of it substantially, and also it's good for London because you've got amazing trendy buildings there rather than the old rubbish that was there previously. So, but my wife had some minor say a long time ago in suggesting to whoever was the American ambassador at the time that they had a look at that site.
Well, indeed, and most Americans won't know this, and I'll just repeat it a little bit for the membership. But this was one of the most ambitious building undertakings for an American embassy in the history of our diplomatic relations anywhere. We've had big undertakings in other places that exceed the $1 billion, but not for one building. For example, our compound in Pakistan is over $2 billion over a period of years. But the embassy in London, everybody, it's just south of the Thames, in an area that was, as you said, sir, quite a bit depressed. It definitely needed refurbishing. And this building is nothing short of phenomenal. And all the environment, all the neighborhoods around there have really started to pick up. And it's been quite an impressive thing.
And I mean, America collectively ought to have made a lot of money out of it, because you bought a lot of the property when it was still depressed, and it's turned into a valuable site.
Probably right. I don't know. I remember President Trump was aghast at how we could ever do something so terrible. And it turns out it's worked out to be really quite good.
Yes,
and quite an ambitious project.
He's missed out on it.
Good.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, my personal comment, I'm a little troubled by some of the harsh rhetoric you said about the EU. But there's no doubt that this parting, separation of Brexit and the EU has been a painful one for many. And I agree with your view that it has sort of shaken the timbers, if you will, of the EU itself, which is perhaps one of the reasons they kind of try to bind together to not have others react kind of like the UK has. And I would like to believe that there are lessons from this to be learned, that the UK goes its own way, but the EU continues and survives. And let us hope that in both cases, you're very important to us, as you know. The EU is very important to us as individual members in country like Germany, France, and everybody. So it'll be very important. Well, Lord Flight, you've devoted a full hour to talking to us, and we very much appreciate it. You do bring a different and unique perspective, but unique to us because often you don't hear that. Maybe not unique in the UK at all, and we very much appreciate it.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. And I would just comment that right back when we first went into the EU, I was a supporter. I campaigned in favor of it. And to me, what has happened since has been a big disappointment. And I believe, as I said, that the politics that has been driving continental Europe has actually been unfortunate and damaging. And I think a lot of people, as you commented yourself, think that's a rather harsh view. But I think if you step back and think about what is happening, what are the policies, the EU is, I don't believe the EU is at all good news. And I hope that Britain exiting will shake it up to make some much needed reforms.
Well, sir, we're getting a lot of chat comments thanking you for your wonderful presentation and comments and perspective. I even have a merci beaucoup, Lord Flight, for you. But anyway, thank you very much. And I don't know, Tina, anything else?
Thank you for having me. Any more questions?
Any more questions? I don't see any more. Oh, someone gave me a vielen Dank as well. So we had a German angle. That is this.
Doug?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's Chandler just closing here. As I've listened to these wonderful exchanges and these insights, I was reminded some years back, Lord Flight, when you and Christabel and Barbara and I and some guests spent an evening together at Clifton, where Winston Churchill and Lady Astor many times held forth raconteuring and politicizing and economizing and other things. And I want to just commend PCFR, which I'm thrilled to be a part of, for taking this Zoom format and expanding our footprint in a worldwide fashion so that we can have our own salon type of meeting, with or without Clifton, with or without Lady Astor and Winston Churchill, but with august friends and colleagues and distinguished peers like Lord Flight. And we're very appreciative for your time, Lord Flight, for your excellent moderation, Doug, and we wish everyone Godspeed and hope we can do this again sometime.
Very nice to see you all. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.